My name is Ranbir Joel. I'm an instructor at KPU in the Department of Language and Cultures and Asian Studies. Kwantlen Polytechnic University takes its name from the Kwantlen First Nations. And I wish to acknowledge that we work, study, and live in a region south of the Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded, traditional, and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Kwantlen peoples. I am excited that this very important conversation is taking place at KPU. I know it is something that I discuss in my Punjabi language and Asian studies courses, but definitely we wish to reach more people than just the students at a few numbered courses at KPU. And Anita, I know on social media, you had somewhat facetiously stated, I'm going to fix it all in this one session. But I hope it's the beginning of a series of conversations on this topic. I would like to introduce our MC for today. And he said, just introduce me as Baltej. And I acknowledge that because we all know last names have a great deal to do with caste and caste identity as well. So thank you, Baltej.
Thank you so much, Ranbir. That's the best introduction I've ever had. That's brilliant. I appreciate that. Wonderful. Folks, good afternoon. It's so great to see all of you here. It's an important topic, and I'm grateful that we've taken time out on a Saturday and a long weekend to be here to not only listen, but also to contribute. So let me share some words before we start. And I bring on our esteemed guest here today to share with us some of his information, conversation, learning, and knowledge that he's amassed over the years. There's going to be some ground rules, obviously. This is a tough topic. This is a tough topic. Let's not pretend that it's not. We're going to be challenging some of our norms, some of the things that we have gotten comfortable with, some things that we thought were true, and, well, maybe not so. And some things that have taken us away from a path that was laid out for us by our teachers, both spiritual and also worldly. So allow me to welcome all of you. It's indeed my honor and privilege to serve as your MC here this afternoon. I'm especially looking forward to hearing Dr. Suraj Yengde and deepening my own understanding on the topic of casteism. Now, before we go any further, allow me to share some thoughts to ground us, really, as well as ensure that we align ourselves with some shared expectations and hopes. That what do we want to achieve by being here today? What do we want to leave with at the end of this? What do we want to take? Because you are going to be emissaries. I suspect you didn't know that before you came. But you are. You're going to be emissaries because once you hear, once you understand, not to act on it means you promote it. Not to do anything about it suggests that you align yourself with the old thought. Not to say something when you hear some of these words that oppress is you aligning yourself with oppression. By your presence here alone, you show your support and at the very least, interest in understanding the issue of casteism better. For that to happen, we must be courageous. In just not hearing the information today with our ears, but listening with our hearts. We must also be able to have respectful discussions. So, no direct conversations, no personal interchange. Let's not do that. We're better than that. And Anita has already ushered somebody out earlier. So I will tell you that we are not opposed to ushering people out. Maybe that is why you got me to be here today. And those of you who don't know, I'm also a member of the law enforcement. I haven't actually retired. We must be respectful in our discussion and honest with our ignorance that often exists in our unconscious mind. So today, this is safe space where we are all committing to learning more from each other, remaining open to accepting and, better yet, inviting light into dark corners that exist within our lives, forgotten messages that we should have been acting on. Be deliberate in challenging these thoughts that some of us have come to accept as part of who we are, but rather question why we are still holding on to them, even when it offends the faith, the path that we have tethered ourselves to. Holding on to these thoughts, knowing that these same ideas, by their mere existence, hurts others that are not born into privilege. To be better with each other requires us to work together, and also self-reflection, recognition of where we are in our own understanding and our own continuous commitment to ensure that we are not, in our words or our actions and inactions, asserting our privilege, contributing to injustice, and diminishing the other, and supporting oppression. And in the context that we are here for today, injustice comes due to caste. So, open your minds. More importantly, open your hearts. Let me also share with you, and then I'm going to do a short, very quick experiment with you. I just want to make sure that we cover off these pieces. You see all the exit doors? In case there's an emergency, we'll just line out of those exit doors, out to the front. The washrooms are around the corner. We're all adults. Manage yourselves. If the call comes, you don't need to ask permission. Please go. No worries. Now let me start with a simple experiment, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time that I'm going to trap you. I'm telling you now that I'm going to be trapping you. Those of you who identify as Jats, please put up your hand. Thank you for being squirmish. Thank you for being squeamish with that answer. And those of you who did put your hands up, I want you to know I trapped you. You may, and I want you to know that my question was not if you are a Jat. Rather, I asked you if you identify as a Jat. I will let you ponder the difference. But I'll leave us with this thought. Do we have a choice? Do we want to just get the door? We're going to charge more if people come late. Do we have a choice to identify as a Jat? Could we have kept our hands down? Should we keep our hands down? If our interest is ensuring that we end overt and subconscious oppression, then we must consider what we lend our personal support and growth to. Now, this event here, I wanted to share all that before I told you who this was coming from, because this is a great event. This event is organized by Anita. Anita, stand up. And all of the volunteers, please, could I have you stand up as well? And Chaitanya Association. Thank you. Thank you. All of these types of topics takes courage, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So this is done by Anita, a team of wonderful volunteers, and in collaboration with the Chaitanya Association of Canada. The partners here today, Kwantlen Polytechnic University, who I'm an alumni of, Simon Fraser University, Institute for Humanities, also alumni of, the University of British Columbia, never been there, just kidding. University of British Columbia Asian Studies Department, the Hari Sharma Foundation, Center for India and South Asia Research, Buddhism and Contemporary Society. Our media support is by Channel Punjabi, Aaj Magazine, Rang Magazine, the South Asian Post, Akal Guardian Punjabi Weekly Newspaper, Chardhi Kala International Punjabi Weekly. So again, please be mindful that we're going to keep our talks respectful at all times, no direct conversations. Please do tweet and post. Use our hashtag Dalit Love. So use your social media prowess and presence to do that, please. And our handle at Dalits and Jats. And then during the question and answer period, please do keep your comments and questions to about 30 seconds. We do have feedback forms that I think were on your chairs. Please do fill those out. This is your chance to give direct feedback. We're going to have more of these conversations, and we want to learn from what we did right and what we could have done better. On the event, the type of discussion forums you think we should have moving forward and how we can make them better. I also want us to, I know there's only one or two that have one of these, right? Yeah. So maybe put these on vibrate or silent, continue to take pictures and so on and so forth, hashtag, share, all of that good stuff. But if we could turn those off, that would be wonderful. And if it does ring during the presentation, I am not embarrassed to point you out. All right. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Suraj Yengde. Suraj Yengde is an award-winning, am I saying your last name properly? Thank you. Is an award-winning scholar and activist from India who is doing his inaugural postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Kennedy School. He is a noted public intellectual in the transnational movement of Dalit rights and actively involved in building solidarities of Dalit, Black, Roma, Indigenous, Buraku, and refugee peoples in the Fourth World Project of Marginalized Peoples. His recent work with the philosopher Cornel West has received global attention and calls for unity between the African Americans and the Dalits. He is a passionate human rights attorney by qualification from India and the UK, a syndicated columnist and author. His latest released, Caste Matters, you should all be reading that, has been lauded as a path-breaking book that reveals how caste crushes human creativity and is disturbingly similar to other forms of oppression, such as race, class, and gender. At once a reflection on inequality and a call to arms, Caste Matters argues that until Dalits lay claim to power and Brahmins join hands against Brahmanism to effect real transformation, caste will continue to matter. Guru Gobind Singh said, Manas ki jaat, sab ek hai pehchanbo. With that, I'll turn it over to Suraj.
Thank you everybody for coming. It's a great Saturday morning and I really appreciate you making here. I would really like to congratulate Baljit for really his leadership and his work in the community as well as in the service. Let's give it up to Baljit for his excellent work. Before I begin my acknowledgements, I would like to also acknowledge the indigenous people of this land, and as well as condemn at the same time the colonization that continues to happen even in contemporary times, which is not has become the moment of past, but it's a continuity of that colonial existence. And I hope we all who are here join hands against any form of colonial oppression against anybody. And colonial oppression could come with various forms and colors. It could be a colonial oppression through economy, through gender, through caste, through sexuality, and various forms of other parochial administered oppressions. I would also like to salute to the martyrs of this land who fought against the colonial powers to protect this land and continue to have their own autonomy and governance. And also salute you all and your ancestors for nourishing you with certain love as well as certain ethic to be courageous and to have the fortitude to show up on a Saturday morning to have a conversation on something that perhaps they might not have had. Anita, thank you so much. The young as well as emerging Dalit women leadership that the world so desperately needs. By gathering and having this conversation on equal front, not a confrontation, but a dialogue. And a dialogue that so desperately desires attention of everybody. It's not lamentation, it's not a cry, but it's actually trying to humanize us and our thinking, not through mediated power structures, but on a very humanist level. Thank you, Anita, for doing this, and all the excellent volunteers for really making this event possible. I would also like to acknowledge Chetana Foundation, the leadership of Mr. Ranga, as well as Jabirdi and their excellent partners who are here. Many of my friends are here. Thank you so much. And I also look forward to having the excellent panel with all of you. If I missed any more acknowledgements, please do not hesitate to just raise your hand, say you forgot my name, and I will make sure, with all respect, I respond. One of the things I wanted to begin by asking is, which Viljit almost, he asked, but I would like to, reiterate that by show of hands, let's have a count of how many Dalits are there in this space, or people who identify with their past. How many Jats are there here? Don't fall into his trap. My question was different. So, Sat Sri Akal to everybody, and Jai Bhim. The conversation that we hope to have in forthcoming hour or so will be a start. And if it's a start, that's how we have created new traditions and new religions, because the conversation has never stopped. New ideologies that came forward was through this conversation critical. So I want to focus on 2H today. One is harmony, and second is healing. How can we both groups or other groups can come together and try to find ways. And before we do that, we need to shed off some of our elitist as well as caste sensibilities. We need to be courageous enough to acknowledge that we are casteist. We have been trained to be casteist. We are trained to think and look at the people down. Even though you believe in equality, and even though you believe that Sikhism has offered an egalitarian vision, but we have failed our gurus. And this, as the courage, has to come from the people who claim to be the saviors of Sikhism. And we'll have various anecdotes and experiences, and as well as examples, which will help us to confront this very difficult question. The very premise of Sikhism was formed in opposition to the elite Brahminical Hindu hegemony. Why would we need a different religion when there was already a religion existing in this land? Why did Guru Nanak thought of formulating a new philosophy that will melt down all the hierarchies? There is a very specific purpose to his action. There is a very specific rationale where he was a courageous man who fought against the Brahminical hegemony. Coming out of that Hindu cesspool, challenging the Brahminical scriptures, and then thinking about egalitarianism, bringing about all the castes into one fold, is a very courageous act. Him doing it, and then his tradition being followed by the rest of his followers and the 10 gurus that we have, is an act of immense courage. But that courage was not to give you a certain nasty pride. That courage is to make you more human. That courage is to make you melt down your inherited, inbred hierarchies. That courage has not yet reached to the casteist minds who converted to Sikhism. They remained turban sporting casteist Hindus in the garb of Sikhism. How do we confront this real problem that is existing amongst us? We have to understand that the history of Jats, or the hashtag Jet Pride, is a very recent one. It's a mythical creation, like every other caste narratives that we have. Just Pride is also mythical creation, and the earlier the Jats understand that, the better. If they do not understand that, they will themselves create new myths which their coming generation will question them, and they will have no adequate answers to justify. It's only better that we start having this real concrete dialogue. Now we have to understand, the Jat pride comes mostly from the materialism that was brought into it. The ownership of land. Land was the central aspect that brought out this rabid aggression into the Jat prideness. So when I was asking you how many Jats are here and how many Dalits are here, I just want to identify how many Shudras are here and how many Ati Shudras, how many Shudras and how many untouchables are here. Because these are the two groups which has been most beaten by the Hindu domination of this country. And these are the two groups which remain the agents of Brahminical oppression. We need to understand this. It is not the Brahmin who is coming on the street and beating other Brahmins. It is not the Brahmin who is leaving his temple and coming down and beating other Jats or Dalits. It is the Jat, it is the Balmiki, it is the Ravidasya who is coming and fighting amongst each other. Because the caste pride has infused a fake vision of a universalist values that even you don't carry. So the Jatism replaces Sikhism. When do we confront this Jat pride? Because if you are proud of yourself, it should not come at the cost of someone else's dignity. If your pride is upon someone's unworthiness, if your pride is calling out someone lower, then that pride equates violence. So it is no more a Jat pride, it is a hashtag Jat violence. And we need to think how much of this is going into making up our own 500 or so years of history. How much have we progressed and how much have we not progressed? I'll tell an example. I come from Hajur Sahib. Now many of you all who know one of the five takats, I grew up in Nanded. So I had a friend, Jassi. And Jassi was a practicing Sikh and a very devoted Sikh of that. Jassi would invite us to various Baisakis and various celebrations that would happen into the Gurudwaras. And then when we would go, amidst all the gold, everybody would come, and mostly the Sikh with the turbans, and would bow towards a thing that I never knew what was underneath because it was covered. And I would see a person who is giving air with whatever you call that instrument. Sure. I never understood. I would just go, we bow our head, and we go. It's a crowded place. Then he would take us to a room where arms were kept. Some of them, I think, belonged to Guru Gobind Singh. And then that place was also crowded, so you bow. Especially on some occasions like Diwali, where they would, I think, remove and wash them. There was a huge ceremony. And then the best part came, the langar. And that was the, best part for me, to see how these people were devoted to offering food to everybody, irrespective of whatever their background was. There was no caste certificate, there was no religion certificate anybody asked. You entered the Guru's langar, you had the food, and you left. And of course, then Jassi would ask us to indulge ourselves into seva. And then we would enjoy doing seva because we felt we were not doing seva for something else, but we were doing seva because it was giving us self-satisfaction. It was giving self-contentment. And seva was one of the best parts. Jassi was a very good friend. Jassi and we used to hang out. And we knew each other for quite some years. But I don't remember a time where Jassi ever invited me to his house, or him ever coming to my house. I lived in a Dalit basti, a Dalit ghetto. Ambedkar Nagar, that off. And Jasprit lived next to Gurudwara. Once I went to his house. His father had inquired and all, we talked. That's it. I didn't know anything about Jassi beyond that 4 walls of Gurudwaras wherever we spend time, and sometimes we'll meet outside. I didn't know his personal life. I didn't know what was he doing. And neither did he know about me. He was not interested in me. Now, I would like to think that Jassi was just being naive, but that practice continued with other Sikh friends of mine too. And it was very soon that I realized that Sikhs can also be caste-sensitive people. I was, with the description that Jassi was giving to me, I thought this is the best thing we have right now. With the values he talks about, with the glories he talks about his gurus, and he would get goosebumps whenever he talked about the stories of sacrifice of Guru Gobind Singh. And I would wonder, if this is what his guru is teaching to him, why is his not guru teaching him to also accept me as someone that could be part of his family? What is the difference between him and me? He talked about harmony. He talked about how langar is a space, and we all saw that. But yet, a devoted practicing Sikh was proud of his Jat background. And what that meant was that if he is Jat, I am not a Jat. Who I am? I am someone lower. Don't get me wrong, he was very critical of Brahmins. He very much was. He would have called them Brahmins. Now, if you look through the philosophy of Sikhism, you have to look what a religion can do to a lower caste could be found in the status of Jats. But what a caste can do to a religion can be found in the Jats. Let me break this for you. The lower caste Shudras, peasants, Al-Biruni, one of the famous historians known in the South Asian context, who was a Persian, he records that from 11th to 16th century, 15th century, there is almost no existence of Jats' contribution to anything particular in that region. So for 400 odd years, the lower caste Shudras were not considered at par to contribute anything new to this. But as soon as they find this new philosophy that is bringing them, and that is granting them an equal status out of the lower casteness. Al-Biruni described them as lower Shudra castes. I'm quoting Al-Biruni. These lower Shudra caste see this religion where Guru Nanak is talking about of this higher attainment and talking as you will reach to the heaven or you will reach to the God not by belonging to your caste but by getting into a philosophy that will help you to think about yourself beyond your own internal contradictions. The bhakti. The Jats, the Shudras go en masse into the philosophy given by a Khatri, Guru Nanak. They don't look at caste there. They see someone who is guiding them. And once they go, they take it upon themselves to ensure that the message is carried out. But then the history is not all about rosy. Sikhism adopts many Jat values. One of them is, of course, the turban, which very much a symbolical ways. And of course, the militantism that comes with it is also an outcome. And we had the history after the assassination of the gurus and how the militantism become part of it. Pre that, we always have this reminiscing and also a devotional politics. If Jats in Sikhism are proud about their Jatism, then they are not proud about Sikhism. Both can't go together. Because Sikhism is actually contradictory to whatever the earlier is saying. It is asking you to become the Singh or become the Kaur. There's nothing beyond that. Yet if you bring that into this conversation, what you do is you fail your own gurus. You don't value their teachings. It's a oxymoronic position to take the name of Guru and yet call yourself onto a certain pride, which I said, which is a violence. You can't invoke violence upon the weaker sections under the name of Guru. That is not only a disservice to the religion, but that is a disservice to the egalitarian values that Gurus gave, not only for you guys, but for the rest of the world. By confining it to the Jatism, the values of Sikhism has confined only to this intra-caste contradictions. It has not gone beyond it. Now we all remember, Ambedkar, when he declared in Yola 1935 that he's going to be getting rid of Hinduism, he said, I will not die. I was born a Hindu, but hell no, that's me. I'm not going to die a Hindu. And many religious offerings were, present, and many people wanted Ambedkar to convert to either of religion. Ambedkar investigates this. 1935, he converts in 1956. 21 years. In the meantime, 1936, immediately the Sikh religion is something that attracts him. So he sends his emissaries to Amritsar. These emissaries go, and I'm sure looking at the hospitality and the kind of reception they get converted instantly. Right there. They become Sikhs. The Dalits who went from, I think, Maharashtra become Sikhs, who were the Ambedkar's representatives. Now, Ambedkar is still looking at the critical aspects of what Sikhism is about. But one of the reasons Ambedkar is discouraged from converting to Sikhism, one obvious fact is the aggression of casteism that was existing even during the management board. And second, the leadership of the Gurudwara committee, who were afraid of Ambedkar entering to Sikhism with his 5 times the quantity what Sikhs were with his untouchable population. Now these people who were enjoying the leadership saw if Ambedkar comes, brings his untouchables, which is 5 times more than what Sikhs are in this country, this guy will outnumber us. And if he outnumbers us, he will have more say. And if he has more say, maybe he will engage in certain dialogues and conversations that will be uncomfortable for us to confront, because this guy calls spade a spade. And not just calling out spade a spade, but he is also intellectually engaging in this conversation. He is discouraged by the leadership of the Gurudwara Samiti to not convert to Sikhism. And there are various other reasons that also qualify. He's not interested in Islam, he's not interested in Christianity, he's also, of course, looking at the aspect. He's saying Sikhism is native to the land. If Dalits convert to any other religion, they will be, quote, denationalize them. He gave that interview to Times of India in 1936. And therefore he doesn't convert to either of, and of course he goes to the ultimate value that he found was in Buddhism. Now, when I say Al-Biruni, taking out Al-Biruni from 11th to 16th century, Jats were almost insignificant when it comes to historical contributions. They were the people what they call cattle owners. The professional kind of pastoralism that kind of then builds up into making a certain religious ethic is, I think, is very important to understand. Now, if you have to understand how the caste dynamic works, let's just work with 2 broader categories, which is here, Jats and Dalits. The Jats, of course, with their pre-Sikh background are the Shudras, and the Dalits were also categorized into various, the Chamars or the what they call quote-unquote Churas. Within the Chamars, the Adharmis come, the Jatiya Chamar, the Raigar, Ramdias and Ravidasis. Within the Churas, this is a very interesting caste dynamics. Within the Churas, the Mazhabis, the Balmikis and the Bhangi castes. Now you might see these names occurring also amongst the Gurudwaras or various kind of practices that you have. There are Mazhabi Sikhs, there are Ravidasiya Sikhs, and there are various categories of Sikhs. Pre-Sikhism identities still exist in current Sikhism. What is happening there? It's a smooth transition of caste. It's almost like caste was walking, Sikhism came, they jump over and they continue to walk. The wall of Sikhism couldn't melt it down. It continues to be practiced. Of 12,780 villages of Punjab, 10,000 plus villages have Gurudwaras based on their castes. That's how much harm casteism has done. The discrimination that is based on feudalistic practices, which uses religion to authenticate its own exploits of its own subaltern people, is evident. The Dalits in Punjab, for example, are 31% of Punjab's population. However, the land ownership, the cultivable land ownership, is merely 2.34%. Which means the majority of Dalits, 97% of Dalits, are still landless, are still relying on a jat land owner. And this discrimination, an unequal relation that operates, strengthens one's caste pride aggressively. Let's say you both have no land, or both of you are relying on a government land. The caste pride will have a very little purchase, although it will have. But right now what happens, because you own land, you own resources, and you own people who work on your land, your caste pride becomes so important, and you use land relations to establish your superiority using the casteist Sikhism that we practice in our everyday lives. And when we try to dematerialize the aspect of Sikhism, people say we don't talk about caste. It doesn't exist. We left the religion, and that's why it doesn't matter to us anymore. It's a thing of the past. If past for them means yesterday, then it could be a thing of the past. But their conception of space and time is so limited that evading of concrete real questions don't animate their corpus of thinking self as a Sikhi. It's a dialogue. It's a dialogical presence. So what happens? This operation continues. After independence, the land relations are slightly getting loosened. The Dalits from the Daoba region, for example, are having businesses. They are also entrepreneurial people. They also are getting material. Now what do? You're also having material strength. You use it to exploit. Now these people are also having material resources. Then they have the capacity to purchase assets, the chamars and other castes. We all have the studies out there which does an empirical counting of how much of resources these caste groups own. And when you have money, you claim your equal citizenship into this order. Even you have assets, you will say, I'm not unequal, I'm not lower, I also have 10 acres of land, you also have 10 acres of land. What is lower in me? And when you claim your equal citizenship, that's where it becomes a problem. Because you are not yet a full citizen in a caste ecology. You are a subordinate human being that is there to provide your services without equal wages. You will work day and night and produce surplus for the oppressor caste, who is your feudal lord, or whoever your company owner or whatever industries it might be. Now, in addition to this, 1960s come. It brings about what happens in Punjab. Green Revolution. Now, Green Revolution does bad and good thing. One thing it does is, it brings market into the direct relations of whatever they are producing. Whatever you are cultivating, market is actually a mediating factor. So what happens is, because of that, the cash crop or the crop they are producing is for a larger market. It is not for immediate needs, and that reduces Dalits' reliability on job to 75 days per year. Erstwhile it must have been more than 75 years, but right now Dalits are only employed for 75 days per year approximately. Rest of the time Dalits don't have job. So what do? They look for alternatives. And in finding for alternatives, in going for new opportunities or migrating elsewhere, which we see heavy migration happening, they try to find an economic independence. And in addition to that, reservation policy plays an important role, equivalent of affirmative action. It creates an educated Dalit middle class. This educated Dalit middle class is reading, is understanding, and is challenging its subordinate, subjugated position. And when all of this is happening, simultaneously Ambedkarite consciousness is taking place. Many of the older generations might know, they lived through that, the 1960s, 70s era, where Ambedkarite consciousness is constantly bringing you an identity of your own. It's not asking you to rely on something else. And this Ambedkarite consciousness, what it does is, it establishes various intellectual as well as independent conversations. And one of the things they do is they organize conferences to discuss these things. They organize various conventions to debate about these values. And in addition to this, they establish their Ravidas Sabhas. And then they go try to establish the Gurudwaras. And then they start supporting political movements which is not related to Akalis. They start supporting BSP. They start supporting BAMSEF. Now this is where the disjuncture happens. When modernity kicks in, your equality tends to ask not only for equal citizenship, but more than equal citizenship, which is rightful ownership of whatever you are operating in political, socio-economic spaces. And this rightful ownership equates Dalit assertion. Now Dalit assertion becomes a problem for the casteism that was existing among people in various religions. An assertive Dalits is a dangerous Dalit for bigoted casteist mind. If I'm asserting myself, many of here casteist people will say, why do you identify yourself as a Dalit? You're not a Dalit. If I claim about and talk about my ancestors, the casteist mind will say, I don't need to talk about it. They will ask me to evade my Dalit assertion. Why? The moment I assert myself, I also challenge your position. Because Dalit assertion is also challenging the casteist position that I am put into. And the casteist person doesn't want to look himself or herself as an oppressor. If you look through a different perspective, through a spiritual perspective, you always try to look yourself as a sinner, as someone who is bowing to your own sins, and you are going for a spiritual solace to various religions. And when you look yourself as an oppressor, that contradicts your own position. And it's a mental psychosis that takes place. This Dalit assertion, what it does, it creates conflicts. That's where the Jat and Dalit conflicts, for example, takes. And there are 4 reasons that takes place. First, as I discussed, that Dalits moving away from agriculture and going into entrepreneur and various other activities or businesses. The second is, they upgrade their economic position. They just don't do better, but they are doing better. They're just not living off, but they're actually showing off. Because they have more resources at their own disposal. The third is, of course, what is happening here. They emigrate to foreign countries. And they use the foreign countries' legal norms as well as the structural paradigms that offer them equal citizenship as well as equal rights to have their own institutions. And 4, they challenge the Gurudwara management committees, and they challenge about their own representation in the committees. We all know the Talhan riots that happened in Punjab, where the question of representation was asked and how much it took a violent turn. These were the questions that were unheard for a casteist mind in the erstwhile era. And when you start asking these questions, it actually brings out many insecurities to the front. So an insecure Jat then reacts by violence. And violence not only physical, it can be violence of exclusion too. And we have to feminize the notion of violence. So we'll understand the fluidity of violence in our own makeup. Now, when this insecurity becomes a part of conversation, it doesn't become an isolated, but it becomes every time an assertive Dalit is talking through an insecure lens of a Jat, because him or her doesn't have much beyond or minus Sikhism. Sikhism grants that pride position to a Jat. If had there not been Sikh, as we see, the 4-5 centuries of their record is also almost non-existing. So Sikh is the only place where you can claim yourself as someone who has a pride history. But when a person from quote-unquote subaltern caste claims his same position as Jats are claiming through Sikhism, that becomes a problem. You are using Sikhism to establish yourself as equal. Another person who has converted to Sikhism also is establishing himself as equal. Why does that become a problem? He or she is also on the same boat. Both are trying to reach to one place. But you don't want to grant the same status and same pleasure of this beautiful religion to a person who you think is undeserving of the Guru's wisdom and words. And we cruelize the doctrines and maxims of the gurus who wanted these words to reach to the masses, and he wanted you to melt down your own inbred hierarchies. And as we continue to see in contemporary times, we continue to fail the gurus. Now, all the 10 gurus come from Khatri caste. No Jat has a problem with gurus coming from Khatri caste. But when a person from a lower caste or subaltern caste claims his own guru as Ravidas, it becomes a problem. We have to understand, every group needs his or her own icon to look up to follow up to. That's always been the historical construction. So Balmikis, for example, go to Balmiki, they are named after Balmiki. In Ravidas, of course, the Chamars look after the wisdom of their own ancestors. And they see there has been injustice done. They see that their own great ancestors is called out as a Bhagat and not given the status as what they deserve them as. And because there is non-acceptability, and people, when you talk about Sikhism or they talk about any values, they talk about evangelizing Sikhism. Why don't you convert to Sikhism? Well, Ambedkar wanted to convert Sikhism. Historical references doesn't give us positive stories of convert to Sikhism. What is it going to change in my lifestyle if I convert to Sikhism? Is my material relations going to solve that we have outside Gurudwaras or inside Gurudwaras too? And I think these conversations don't come. So Sikhism offers Jat a Brahmin feeling. They have been longing for this Brahminness for so long. A Shudras, lower caste, now immediately when Sikhism offers them a certain status on equal level, they don't want to break it, but they want to climb on it. And it happens very well. What do the Jats, by Guru Nanak denying the authority of Brahmins as superior beings, he chops off the Brahmins' existence or the mindset within the Sikhism. So that position is not there. But since that position is absent, Jats try to replace that position to become the Sikh Brahmins. And being a Brahmin is a very vicious position. It's a very oppressive status. It has its own historical baggage that comes with it. You don't want to be a Brahmin. Believe me. Because your beginning was anti-Brahminical. You don't want to go back to the rewinding tape that was already discarded. And what happens with that is, just try to think of other, like the Adoras or the other Khatris, the Baniyas as inferiors. They say you didn't even fight when the actual time of fight was coming. You were all running away. You were all co-opting with the Rajputs. And they look at these inferior beings. Now, one interesting thing happens. The history of Sikhism is not only betrayal by Mughals, it is also betrayal by Brahmins as well as Rajputs. You all know what happened to Banda Singh Bahadur? The local native kingdoms surrounded him to ensure that Banda Singh dies. They ensured that the values of Sikhism, whose message Banda Singh was carried from Guru Gobind Singh up to Punjab, will not reach to the masses. There's a very specific history. But there is a single narrative that Sikh have to hate Mughals. Because Mughals did this kind of torture. Yes, they did. But so did Brahmins and so did Rajput. Where is that accountability going? Why don't we ask similar patterns of questions to this? We are not asking because we are trying to aspire our Jat Brahmin position. We are fine to accept the superiority of Brahmins. That's the reason when Hindus even today claim that Sikhs are part of Hinduism, there is not adequate debate or protest against this very idea. You all know what Amit Shah did recently? He said, except Muslims, Hindus, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, all are welcome in this country. By doing that, what is he doing is, he is trying to overtake the independence of Sikhism that is existing. And he's trying to say, these are our pets that are operating under the larger Hindu pantheon. And when this happens, we don't see our Sikh friends or the hashtag Jet Pride people trying to come on street and protest against these very values that are ingrained. There are protests, I will not say they are not, but they are coming from a certain nationalist sentiments. They are protesting against the Hindu nationalism for different reasons, not to fight against the casteism that is coming from there. You have to understand, it's a very peculiar thing. And the militantism that operates into this, we get people surrounded into this making of the larger Sikh as well as Dalit as well as whatever the Hindu broader identity. And I think that if it is not refuted right now, the Jats will see the downfall of Sikhism that we'll see for unfolding right now. Ravidasi religion is now a new religion. That's the failure of the Jats who were dominating in this religion, should have utilized the Sikhism to spread the egalitarianism, but they contributed into downfalling of Sikhism. And this is the moment right now. It is not yesterday, it is a moment of contemplation. What have we done to the values of our gurus? Why was there a need of a different religion altogether? Why was not one religion enough for all of us? Why was there a need for a new religion to be formed? It is about time the leaders of this religion do a critical self-reflection. Ravidasis have gone, tomorrow someone else will go. The sooner we address this problem, the better. We don't need tokenized representation. Now, one of the Jat Sikh friends was telling, most of the ragis or the singers, he said 90% of them are Dalits. That is not going to solve the problem, because 90% of them are singing, but also more than them are getting killed or getting humiliated or getting harassed. I would like to read out Guru Nanak's, my Punjabi is not good, but I'll just read out what I saw in English. And this is Guru Nanak's, I guess, Shabad. Guru Nanak be friends and associates with the lowliest of the lowliest. There is no need to imitate those considered mighty, big and powerful. This is hashtag Jats for you. You don't need to imitate. This is the clearest message that Guru has given. Why do you want to aspire and have those wet dreams of becoming something that you are not? The right to bear weapons, for example, is a very good example. The weapons are there for self-protection and protection for the weakest. If there is an oppression, use that weapon to stop that oppression. But what have they done instead is use the same weapon to oppress the weakest person. What have we done to this phenomenal logic of the right to weapon was not there to harass or kill or slaughter or oppress or deter the weaker section of people. It was there for the protection. And what has happened to the Dalits who converted to Sikhism? Why have their weapons not reacted similarly when there was oppression commissioned against them? This is also a fundamental pacifism, the kind of question we need to ask. So the question happens, why is this Jat pride? And many anthropologists like Joyce Pettigrew had written about this. She done research about it, and she talks about Jats are brought out as a people who are proud. You are a proud Jat people, irrespective of your qualification, irrespective of your wealth or power. Just be proud of you. Second reason, they could become this aggressive people is because they conquered religious institutions and added flavor of Sikhism to their martialness. This is a very critical thing. The martiality was existing, was used in the Sikhism to promote these values. And so, this is a transition that happens. The Jats were initially, as we say, pastorals, the cattle owners. Then they own land. Then they become zamindars, the landowners. Then they have these economic conditions that make them rich. And then they decide to renounce their low caste position. And they go to Sikh and they become a Sikh. It was otherwise a bhakti, meditative, contemplative religion, which is actually asking you to go beyond this material world that you have. And then they become militant, which becomes a Jat identity. And this Jat identity becomes your Punjabi identity. How you see the colonization of Jats overall Punjabi identity. And this is for those anti-colonial activists that we have to understand. Almost the songs you have, the popular culture you have, the praises you sing of that, there is always a reference to Jat pride. And I always said, as I said already, Jat pride doesn't come in its own standalone category. It's a violence upon non-Jats. Because there is a lot of historical making. I will conclude with these 2 points. When we see that the contemporary era is having it's going through a different phase. It's a very difficult phase. We are embracing the diversity and the multiple identities that we are bringing into it. Yet we have not resolved the historical baggages that have come with it. And what it does is the historical baggage then assimilates into the new identity formations, and then the problem becomes further complicated. Meaning, even if I have tried to make a new religion, if there is a casteist sensibility, or if I am trying to establish a new Gurudwara, if there is a casteist sensibility, I merge these two, and in a modern logo, I make it something else where the real problem that exists doesn't surface as much. And so we have to find out what is the problem here, what wrong did happen. It is not as outspoken, it is not as visible as it should have been, but it adopts a different name, a different genre, a different sentimentality, and then big parade. So it might not appear as caste-based or casteist because it has co-opted into various formations, yet it has a reason why it was formed the way it was formed. If the Jat pride exists, then there will be non-Jat pride also existing. It's as simple as it. If somebody here, let's say few people from different region, British Columbia pride, then people from Toronto will have their own pride. Because the regionalism that we develop through this, and it is but obvious, the hashtag Jat pride is going to bring many subcaste Jat or whatever subcaste prides, and this will see the division. And this division will eventually fall out and then establish into something else that we don't want to happen. This is but an obvious gesture to, as I said about Ravidasi, but also various other forms. So we have to now account to it. Many people will say, I did not know about this Jat pride, and I'm just contemplating this. My parents taught me about this. Casteism treats and mistreats not only your own self, but also your children, their children, and their coming generations. How do we confront this problem? This problem can be confronted if we apply a radical anti-caste consciousness through this medium. We need to heal together. If Jats are getting anxious that the Dalits are leaving Sikhism, is it because the Jats still want untouchables to work under them? Are they not here to look for a new identity? Every person who is lowest would like and would strive for a newer version of his or herself. They would not live to lower. So if they are leaving to a different religion, or if they are trying to criticize you, there is a self-examination that we need to do. And until and unless we address that question, a proper healing won't take place. Healing cannot happen without critical engagements. And that critical engagement means calling out each other's oppressions in public and standing accountable to the truth, as well as the transformative that this notion is going to bring about, where conversion is part of this. For the people before I go, I will read out this Guru Granth Sahib's verse from Guru Nanak, who says, and again, hashtag jets for you. I am the lowliest of the low caste, lower than the lowliest. Nanak's companionship is with them, not emulating the established. You bestow your grace where the lowly are looked after. Thank you. Jai Bhim.
All right, let's. We're running a little bit behind. We did have 10 minutes for you, but we're now going to take 5 minutes back and give you a 5-minute break. So please be here in 5 minutes. That's 1:40. We're going to start at 1:39 and 50 seconds. All right, please. You understand more than most how important some of these conversations are and how important it is to continue with these conversations. I want to thank Suraj. Wow, mind-blowing, my brother. Very good. Thank you for challenging. Because I got to tell you, some of those things were not so apparent. Some of those things were not so in our awareness. We continue with our walk of ignorance, doing things that we think are okay. And even that, simple understanding and also bringing to everyone's awareness where you have these contradictions in the same post where you have hashtag Jarts and then you speak about how you are lowly. It doesn't work. So it is critical because we continue to propagate this oppression not only outside of our places of worship, but in our places of worship. So I know this is a little bit off topic, but I just want to make sure you understand that Harmandir Sahib, Golden Temple, and I know maybe some of you don't know this and you may not be aware of this, but Harmandir Sahib doesn't allow women to do kirtan there. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. And there's a Gurdwara here in Surrey that doesn't allow women to do kirtan. So we can chat about that too at some point. So we have a lot of work to do if we're going to be true to our teachers and our spiritual guides. But let me take a minute here to introduce our moderator, Mo Dhaliwal, who's also a friend and a brother and a colleague, and very grateful for him to be as active as he is in our community and continuing to move ahead many issues of social justice. Mo's dedication to cross-cultural understanding through the arts has taken many forms over the decades, from curating events, designing exhibits, and hosting dialogues, to publicly speaking out against experiences of discrimination. Mo strives to draw attention to the hard topics. This is a hard topic, as a way of making change. Mo founded the Vancouver International Bhangra Celebration Society, an organization dedicated to building community through Punjabi music and dance. And as the Director of Strategy for Skyrocket Digital, he engages with clients who are starting new ventures or interested in making social impact through their work. So I want to thank Mo for being here today and also being our moderator for the panel. Thank you.
I'm going to thank Baltej for the very glowing introduction. But I should probably start with a disclaimer for somebody that's really passionate about social justice and all the rest of it. I've never been involved in anything to do with caste deconstruction before. As a self-identifying Jat, this is my first time being involved in anything like that. So I want to thank Anita for the opportunity, because I think leading up to this, at first, I think the exercise started off that it was just going to be a very intriguing conversation and a very intriguing topic. And as we grew closer and closer to the date, there was an increasing realization of how much work I have to do. And today is it's a little surreal as well, because I had the opportunity in media recently to sit across from a white news director and try to explain structural racism. And I was pretty exasperated trying to get through this conversation. And I feel like I'm playing a little bit of the role of the white news director today. And I'm going to try to make my questions less ridiculous, but forgive me if they are. And I think there's an interesting opportunity here because there was conversations I had with family members and even some of my staff at work talking about caste, right, and how it shows up in life. And there was lots of, you'll hear, protestations from people saying, oh, well, don't make it worse by talking about it, right? That's a common one in my household, in my family, and in a lot of circles that I'm in. Or people will say, well, that's what Sikhis for, right? Thank God we're Sikh and we don't have caste. And so there's a real separation between policy and practice. And some of this even showed up as almost like a kind of a psychological, like Freudian slip, like leading up till today, from various friends and colleagues. I received messages from no less than 3 people independently of each other that said, hey, what time is that Dalits versus Jats thing happening? And I had to remind them that there's actually an ampersand in the poster. But the question was, when is that Dalits versus Jats showdown taking place? That's right now. Yeah. So I love the way you phrase the fact that this is like a healing event, right? And the fact that these conversations are about healing. And this is beautifully framed in this concept that I was introduced to on Thursday night for the first time of Dalit love. And being the ignorant white news director, I'm going to ask, placing the labor on you, of what is a reasonable intervention, right? Because I think why we're here, you've elucidated incredibly. And I think that you shared a perspective that not many of us have actually had the opportunity to look from. And once seen, it can't be unseen. But now that we're here, what's a reasonable intervention? Like, how do we, what do we do when you walk away and we don't have, a Harvard professor to lead us through these conversations? What do we do in community as a reasonable intervention?
Thank you, Mo, and thank you for being here. You did not leave, and I think that also depicts that there is an interest in the community to kind of address and challenge each other's in a very human sense, where I really want to push Mo, but also I want Mo to push me on certain things. It has to be a exchange. It cannot be one-sided, and I think that's one of the ways. You're right when you say that you're putting the labor on me to explain. But then, if not me, who else will? So I will not necessarily put it as me doing the labor, but I will see doing a service, and in service of you, in service of me, in service of the people. And I think that's where, if we frame the conversation, we will then have our tables settled. One of the growing resentments among people, especially who belong to the whatever order, is there is an evasion. People are not willing to own themselves up, and that's why we have new identities being framed almost every second year, be it with some peers, with some deras, or in some new religion. You know what I mean? And I think that has to do with the spiritualism is vacant right now in our societies. If that question is addressed, I think, as a priority, then maybe we will unfold various other conversations. Now, what materialism does is, it just covers it up. So you just go on Sunday Gurdwara to ask for your forgiveness for all the sins you committed for the last 6 days. And I think that spiritual catastrophe that we have right now is a very dangerous moment for all of us, basically. And where do I draw the line of not having almost a traumatic confrontation every time I'm explaining myself, And I think one of the things we can do with this effort is that we will need to start having conversations not just on understanding each other, but also on how to progress from here. Because I think that's one of the critical things. And if you ask me, I would really like for the Gurudwaras, the Jat-dominated Gurudwaras, to organize yearly conventions and conferences which declares Gurudwaras against caste conference. Which is actually the purpose of Gurudwara there. If you are not doing that and just having this material exploitative forgiveness business happening, then we should ask, why are we doing that? And it is upon, I told my friend who was like, let's do this Jats against caste conference. He said, no, not just, let's do against Sikh. And then I told him, you're not committing crime on other person because you're a Sikh. You're committing a crime upon others because you're a Jat. When do you confront this? So even in his progressivism, he was regressive. He will talk all about, and he claims himself a lapsed atheist, and then coming back to, Sikhism, which is very good. But in addition to that, we need to make sure the resources that Gurudwaras have across the world, they deploy that to ensure that caste is eradicated. You guys have networks, you guys have the whatever strength. You also are represented in parliaments. One of yours will become, you're not only, one of ours will become perhaps the leader, and he's also the leader in Canada and all other spaces. So how do we use our privilege to destroy our privilege? Because this privilege is not just sitting on a chair and enjoying, because it's sitting on skulls. It's sitting on dead bodies that are freshly slayed just about an hour ago. And yet we want to live in this. Now Jats and Dalits have a very unique role to play, let me tell you. These are majority of the masses. If these two groups even politically think they can contribute in uprooting the Hindu doctrinated casteism that is operating amongst us and also among outside. Just by the sheer numbers and by the sheer devotion, if we believe in our religion, this is what our religion is telling us. Let's commit to it. There is no other, for example, other religions have their countries. For example, in Muslims, they have at least 54 to 55 countries. For Christians, of course, the majority of that is Christian. But for people like Sikh, or the Buddhists, or the Dalits, that's all you have got. There is no externality that is going to, So it's up to us now, we realize that not falling into the trap of something that you are not even at the table when the caste was made. You are a peasant. You are a slave of some other Brahmin or some other king. Somebody else made this mixture of caste and give it to you to consume. So something that you are not even part of making, why will you carry it so religiously? Because that was made to make you low in the first place. And I think the Jats understand it earlier the better. That there is a reason for their existence. They have to understand the Shudra attitudes contaminate their sense of being a Sikhi. So these two groups need to have solidarity events as well as exchanges. Let's start with what they call roti beti. Let's have meetings. Let's have gatherings. Let's go to each other's gurdwaras. Let's not have a because if we say, like Baljit was saying about the women issue, now that needs to be addressed. So does caste needs to be addressed. So how do we address that? We need to get rid of certain parochial mindsets and values that are indoctrinated into us. And unless we do that, and how does that come? That comes with courage. We need to be courageous. If you want to continue the tradition that has been so beautifully retained so long, with its own internal contradictions, we have to resolve this. Or else, what will happen is, the people who are enjoying the benefits of their superior position, time is going to change. Not always you are going to be on the superior position. Not always the wealth is going, it's going to change. And then imagine what is going to happen. The history is going to repeat and going to then harass. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make Dalits the next Jats or the next oppressors. We want to make them the next whatever human beings they are, and that will only happen when the other oppressor does not intimidate them. And that intimidation will not happen when you will start actually having a harmonious dialogue. And I think that's where the community needs to identify. We have created divisions. That divisions are existing, and we need to declare, yes, our Gurudwara, we don't believe in this, but we have practiced certain things. That is what it has happened. We have done this wrong. We need to reconcile. You are having TRCs happening here, truth and reconciliation. It's also about time the Gurudwara does a caste-based truth and reconciliation event here.
Well, thankfully, we have at least one Gurdwara president in the room, so hopefully that message will resonate. So I'm going to make this a little bit more personal now, because, I mean, what you're describing is a bit of community intervention. And I want to explain sort of a personal struggle that I have. And this is, I think, kind of rooted in this idea of like self-acceptance. Like I've been on this, journey of, really private battles playing out in public spaces. So I think one of the reasons I was involved in community was actually to try to figure myself out. And for a long time, I've held that a part of figuring myself out was figuring out this Jat side or this Jat narrative. But it's also been described as kind of like another violence, right? So I've been grappling with, coming into this conversation today of how do I explore what I am and what made me this way without sort of inflicting another violence on somebody, right? And I get the idea of using privilege to destroy your own privilege, and I don't want to misquote you, but you had this great line the other evening where you said Brahmins, and in this case I'm going to paraphrase a little bit and say maybe Brahmanical thinking, but Brahmins must become the cultural suicide bombers. And that was a really interesting metaphor if I'm taking it right. And so, even coming into today, I'm trying to figure out how does somebody like me get to a place of self-acceptance. And you called me out on Twitter the other day asking me to humanize my insecurity. So how do I humanize my insecurity? How do I get to a place of self-acceptance, of understanding what my Jat narrative is, but without inflicting a violence?
Thank you, Mo. And I was not calling out on you individually, but I was calling on the Jat prideness that exists. And thank you for that question. And I think, first thing we have to do is we have to start willing to accept our vulnerability. Let's be vulnerable with each others. Let's be open. Let's be, sensitive. And being in that position is not of weakers, because that's what patriarchy teaches us. But that's the power of strength. If I'm vulnerable with you, Mo, vulnerability is actually shared. Then you will also be vulnerable. And we'll come at a point where we will think that the problem is somewhere else. We are just carrying it on our backs. We didn't even, manufacture it. For you to self-accept, what I want is to realize that there has been, a history, but history is still a present fact. So history has happened, but if history is repeating every day, I need to make sure that I address that. So I use my position and I go in Jat circles and tell them and call them out. If I go in Jat circles, it will have a different reaction. People will not accept. But let's say Mo says that, or any other, influential person, Maljit says that listen, this is a problem. And I will make sure I will do my whole part in humanizing your insecure self, because this is where the pride is coming from. I call upon the Brahmins in the book, and when I say Brahmin, also the Brahminical actors, to be cultural suicide bombers. Use your privilege, and when I say cultural suicide bombers, it's also blowing off your privilege. You just don't go there. And when you are blowing off, make sure that you wound somebody's caste sentiment. Without having that frontal, emotional, psychological attack, it's not going to happen. Or else it's going to be just sharing and caring kind of a dialogue. The way we have right now, we need to understand, and I think this should be declared outrightly, that if we believe in certain values, we will abide by it. And if that means going back to a religious text, going back to whatever, and digging out those specific narratives, those specific stories, those specific shabads, and slapping on the faces of people who are actually denying us that, maybe then that should be our next call. Maybe using that shabads of Guru Nanak, who says, I will not try to imitate to the mighty, I will work on the lowliest of the lowest. Maybe that should be, could be one of the ways of channeling our self-assertion as well as rage to call out on people. Now, if a believing, practicing Sikh, can he or she disagree with the verses that are in Guru Granth Sahib given by Guru Nanak? If not, then let's abide by it. Why do you have selective Sikhism? And this selection of apportioning whatever portion we can have and then feel better is not going to solve. And so when you are working, for example, in your individual life as as someone, as a person of color, or a person who is challenging these white supremacist norms, you also understand how it means to be on the other side. And you're in an interesting position where you understand how your victim position has harmed you psychologically as well as in your own personal growth. And it's traumatic, it's denigrating, and you come out with a feeling of exasperation, as you said. It's tiring. But also you understand now, okay, maybe I'm also committed. And that applies to the males in our society too, right? If they are fighting against this, they have to also recognize that they are enjoying the privileges of being a male in a patriarchal society. So if I am also fighting, I need to acknowledge that I am also an aggressor of a society. And if I'm not simultaneously participating in dismantling patriarchy, as I am doing with caste and other forms of oppression, then that means nothing. That means I'm only presenting myself as a victim of society, whereas I'm losing myself as someone who can participate in oppressing other vulnerable bodies of our society. And for this, we need to start having, I think, you all can maybe think, but why do you celebrate any festival that will not have social justice to its core? Because I think I look at Sikhism as a broader social justice project that was there to humanize the humanized self, the D/hyphen-humanized self that was given by the Hinduism that was imposed upon us. This project wanted to humanize us, and they did. But then again, caste sensibilities kicked in, and then it started dehumanizing.
Well, a lot to think about there. I think I'm going to actually introduce the panelists now. I'm going to catch up a little bit of time. I know we're running just a couple of minutes behind. So I'm going to introduce Megan Rao Kara first. Megan was born and raised in Surrey, BC. She's a third-generation Canadian. Her family has deep roots in the Dalit community, as her grandfather and close family started the Guru Ravidas Sabha in Burnaby, BC. She's currently in her third year at UBC, majoring in integrated sciences with concentrations in physiology and nutrition. As the vice president of the UBC Integrated Sciences Student Association, she enjoys helping to facilitate a rewarding social experience as well as provide academic resources for integrated science students. Please welcome Megan. And to her right is Sharanjit Kaur Sandra, who's the coordinator at the South Asian Studies Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley. She's a co-curator of exhibits at the Sikh Heritage Museum, which is located in the National Historic Site, the Gursikh Temple in Abbotsford, BC, and a sessional faculty in the Department of History at UFE. She's currently a PhD candidate in the Department of History at UBC and is interested in looking at the effective experiences of museum visitors through a critical race theory lens. Sharon has a great passion for activist work and engagement in the community through academia and museum exhibits. Please welcome Sharon. Upkar Singh Dudley is the current managing director at Oxus Nexus, where he leads the scientific research and experimental development division and also manages co-op and practicum placements for university students in science and tech. Ambedkar is the executive director of the Opus Prep Foundation, working alongside South Asian and Indigenous youth, a commissioner with Vital Statistics, director at Surrey Crime Prevention Society, director at Diverse City Community Services. He's the regional zone coach for Basketball BC and the vice president of the Indian Classical Music Society. Please welcome Ambedkar. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions for our panelists, and then we'll throw it back to Suraj for some reactions. So maybe we'll go from left to right, right to left, from Megan to Ambedkar. Megan, what's your personal experience of caste? How has caste shown up in your life?
From a very young age, I was taught about caste. So I'd say at about 11 years old, my parents taught me very early on, not necessarily about caste, but to critique caste. So at a very young age, I already knew that the caste system was flawed. I always thought that, like my naive self, that caste would never come up in my life because, like many, I thought that caste was a thing of the past. In grade 11, I was humbled, and I realized that it really wasn't. For the first time in my entire life, someone asked me what my caste was. And it really did shake me to my core, because I had not, until that moment, realized that caste mattered, kind of like a reference to your book. But yeah, so at that moment, I realized that caste mattered, and from that moment, I kind of became like a little caste activist. When I noticed that caste kind of came up in my life, I would have that conversation, and I like to kind of really give credit to my parents, because I would not have been able to have that conversation had they not told me to critique caste. If I had been taught about the caste system that the way that many are taught, that Dalits are lower and that we're oppressed, I most likely would have been scared to share my story and not empowered. Caste is still important to me. I like to bring it up in a lot of my conversations. I'll tell it to my to my friends who aren't even Punjabi. I like to tell them that it's something that's going on, because no matter what, we do have a big South Asian population in the Lower Mainland, and a lot of them, even not knowing a lot about the Punjabi culture, have heard the word Jat. So I even asked a couple of my friends that they don't even know a lot about the caste system, but they know what a Jat is. I think that it does suck that instead of us teaching people about caste, we're teaching them about the different breakdowns, and that we're already kind of teaching other individuals to oppress. I guess that's kind of what I'd say there. Yeah.
Thank you. And Sharon, what's your personal experience of caste?
So I didn't know I was born into a Jat family until 12 years ago, when I was going to get married. So I fell in love with who's my husband now, and he was not Jat, he's Nai. And so much of what you said, Suraj, when you were talking had me triggering. So my heart's racing the whole time as Suraj is talking, because I was like, yes, I was asked these questions. So when I said to my parents, I want to marry this person, the first question they asked is, what caste is he? I said, I have no idea. I didn't know that was something I needed to even worry about. The second question they asked is, how much land does he have? How much jameen does he have? Once again, had no idea. So what ensued after many years of back and forth was that I ran away, and I eloped, and I married my husband. And what has happened since then is my Jat privilege became aware. And I became aware of what Jat privilege is. And when Baltej Uncle-ji asked, how do you identify? Do you identify as a Jat? I didn't put up my hand, because I don't identify as a Jat or as a Nai. And when Bajurg come up to me and say, what caste are you? I say, I'm a Sikh. When people in the schools, or when people try to find out how you are, right? Like Sandra, ajeeb janaya, kehe janaya, right? Right? Like, you have to call it as it is. And so I consider myself an anti-caste, and I'm going to talk today about how I teach my children to be anti-caste as well. So that's my personal experience.
Ambedkar, same question. What's your personal experience of caste?
I think as we move down, you get older as you come to understand what caste is. So Megan mentioned she was really young. You mentioned you were in your 20s.
I'm 35.
You're 35.
Oh, when I learned about caste.
Well, when you learned about caste.
Yeah.
I never knew about caste. And I, Ambedkar and yourself, you guys were asking, who's Jat, and if you guys could put up your hands. I'm interested in who knew about caste at a very young age. At a very young age. Well, let's say from birth. Who's known about caste? Put them up. Right. And how many people did not know about caste from birth? Right. And I count myself in that category. And I'd be interested to see, it's kind of hard to do in this room, how many of those people were born in Canada, meaning settlers in Canada. Right. So, yeah, right. There's one person, myself too. I think that has a big part of it. And I was talking to a friend of mine earlier too. When you don't have that awareness or understanding, it's, a part of it is it's never discussed. The other part is that you're semi-privileged, and I use that term very carefully because, Jat privilege, we just talked about it. I was born, and the few minorities that I was around were all Jat. And we were all, not only Jat, we were, I mentioned earlier, we were all from the Malwa region. The first time I encountered that there may exist a caste was when I first heard about Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar in New York. And second time was again Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, and I met Jai Verdi at the time. Those were monumental shifts in how I view caste, and how perhaps as a Jat we have a hand in suppression and stigma, and how that needs to be converted and changed. When I got the call from, I was talking to Anita about this event. There's a student in my office, and I put the phone down, and he said, well, what was that about? And I said, I really have no idea. And honestly, I got to say, I still am unclear as to exact direction we want to move with this, and I hope that's okay to say. My hope is that out of this comes an understanding that the caste system should be abolished outright. Whether you're born in Canada, you're Indian, whatever, it should just not exist whatsoever. That said, though, I think where my interest also lies is unpacking truly what a Jat is. I think it's been misappropriated. I think it's been subsumed under the caste system. But to just nullify Jat or Jatism by saying, well, it's got these stereotypes, that won't cut it. We've tried that. Sikhis tried it. Suraj mentioned that. Sikhi came along and there was this wall, and then we just kind of jumped over it, right? So we now know that certain measures do not work. So what is it? What is the origin of Jat? Are we this nomadic tribe that spread and dispersed throughout the world, not just India? I think those are questions that I'm interested in.
Thanks, Upgar. And actually, maybe we'll start from the end and come back this way. So, I think you were starting to kind of touch on the idea of abolishment and how, Sikhi came along to abolish caste. But there's obviously a huge chasm between policy and practice, right? Because if it was just about establishing policy, it'd be so easy, because you could just come up with a doctrine and off we go. But there's something missing in the practice. So have you had the opportunity or ever attempted to intervene in some sort of caste-based issue?
No, I haven't. I've never encountered it. I met Megan for the first time the other day, and I'm having a hard time even saying the word now. And I mentioned to Megan that I can't say certain caste names. I just have an inability to say them for whatever has been ingrained throughout childhood. That you cannot repeat certain names because they've been labeled as derogatory when really they're not. And so when Megan and I were standing around talking, the notion is that you should be able to wear, and I think you agreed to this, that you should proudly wear whoever you are, regardless of, and there should be no hierarchy. This goes back to abolishing caste. But I think it's been near a millennia, if not longer, of us continually, repeatedly, fueling those categories, that only now I can perhaps address the idea of maybe getting involved in deconstructing what caste is. But to date, absolutely not.
Thank you. Sharon, I'm going to throw it to you. The obvious intervention that you undertook was obviously eloping. After that, what was your secondary intervention?
So I just want to say that, it's once you do kind of once I discovered this existence of Jat privilege and caste, the world that opens before you and how critical and aware you become of the language of caste is phenomenal. So it is not that caste does not exist. It is not that the language of caste does not exist. It's because it's like racism. The moment you learn about it, you suddenly become so critical and aware, you see it everywhere. And caste is very much the same way. So even those roundabout ways to find out what village you're from, it's a way to locate your caste. The roundabout way that kids will discuss music and pop culture, and I'm talking about 8-10-year-old kids talking about Sidhu Moosewalas of the world, invoking casteism in their conversations is oppression. The way that people in my neighborhood will say "Nanya da kara," that's caste oppression. It exists in every facet of every level, but you just have to become aware of it. You have to open your eyes to it, and you have to become critical. Totally forgot. Oh yeah, right. How I do, right. Got my kids. Okay. So with that, what I want to say is our children are amazing things, are amazing little creatures. And what a mentor of mine once told me is that they come into this world like blank slates, right? They're these beautiful blank slates. If we as parents and we as grandparents do not write on those blank slates, other people will. Other things will, music will, religion in some aspect will. It is our duty, whether or not we see caste, we believe in caste, it is our duty to inculcate them to become critical little human beings, okay? So like my children, I have to be very careful how I have caste conversations, and normally I'd bring them into this place, but because I'm talking about my own history, which I haven't told them all yet, I want to be mindful of them, right? But I teach them that this is what Jat is when we talk about music. So all of a sudden, they think Jat is a swear word now. They think Jat is a bad word, which I'm actually okay with, because what I'm saying is let's unpack. And they take that conversations into their classroom and say, yeah, we told somebody Jat is a swear word in our school. And I said, all right, not bad. We'll unpack that later, because they're only 8 and 10-year-olds. But the fact that they are saying this to their classmates is incredibly powerful, because those children are then taking that language home saying, somebody in my class told me Jat is a bad word. Why is that? Because Jat is associated with oppressive language and oppression. Inna kavi sikha deo bachchiyan nu, they will take it and they will go with it, and they will learn to be little social justice advocates. And we have to teach our children this. We just have to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We have to teach them.
Actually, you mentioned Sidhu Moosewala, so I have to say this. Just to kind of get to the ridiculousness of the projection and impression of Jat culture in music especially, me and my niece sat down and counted. In one of his songs, Jat is mentioned 38 times. I forget which song it is now. Anyways.
But even with that, right, like when you hear, as a person who's non-Jat, hearing that again and again and again and being evoked is like a sword stabbing you again and again and again. So the viscerality of that cannot be minimized. It is a visceral experience when you're at a reception party and all these Jat songs come on, and how many people are dancing who are non-Jat, and they're hearing this invoked in their eardrums again and again. It's a violence. And we tend to minimize the power of that violence as well in music.
And 38 times in a 3-minute song is driven by some sort of insecurity. So, Megan, when or where have you had the opportunity to intervene on some sort of caste issue?
I think I like to say that I do it in small ways, but in many. For example, to kind of go back to when me and Ambedkar got to chat earlier this week, the word that he was having difficulty saying was Jamar. And I can say it loud and proud because I've been taught about my Jamar history. Right, so one thing that my Pua Anita wrote beautifully at one of the exhibits in the Surrey Art Museum was, am I a proud Jamar or am I not a Jamar at all? So I think when we're unpacking identity, that's something that we really do need to address. Do we include caste as a part of our identity, or do we include it as a part of our history? And I'm still really struggling with that because I myself don't know what to say. But I would say that the easiest way to kind of talk about caste and to intervene is to do it in small ways. So if I hear someone say, jatta I'll be like, okay, well, like, what does that really mean, though? Right? Like, I've heard girls in school say it, yeah, we can do this because we have money and we're Jats. So I'll say, okay, so does having money all of a sudden become exclusive to only Jats? Or is that something that's kind of like a association that you have with Jats, right? One thing that also really hurts me is when we associate negative things with Jamars or lower caste. Because at the end of the day, everyone is out here doing great things regardless of caste, right? I even had a family member who was also a lower caste once say to me that Jamara Dinane don't really do much things, right, with their life. So they were very like, yeah, it's good that you're doing things with school. Usually Jamars don't really become anything in life. And it really hurt me to my core because I was like, someone who is also of a lower caste background is coming out here and oppressing one of their own. So that kind of just shows the extent to which we've kind of promoted Jat centricity even within ourselves. So same thing, hall parties. We all go and we all dance to Jat songs, but if all of a sudden like Potte Jamana that comes on, we're like, no, take a seat. That's not okay, right? Yeah. It's all of a sudden it becomes like awkward. Like, why are we all of a sudden doing this, right? So I think the best way to do it, and like you said as well, is to have those conversations and to start them early on, to critique caste and not to promote it, right? To have those small conversations. If someone says something to you that bothers you, you don't have to make a big deal out of it. You can just go and have a private conversation if you like. That's what I usually like to do. I'll see it with my friends. I'm friends with a lot of Punjabis, and if they do say something caste related, I like to kind of go in and on the side or message them privately and say, you know what? I do want you to know that I have a Jamar history, and when you say that, you are actually attacking people like me. It becomes a violence, right? So when they see how it affects people in real life, they all of a sudden realize, and I've never had someone actually come up to me and say, well, I don't care about your feelings. Every single conversation that I've had with someone about caste has come out positively, and I guess it does go back to policy and what you preach, or what you practice and what you preach. And a lot of them will say, yeah, I'm sorry, but they won't go back and practice it. But even them apologizing for that small act is a step in the right direction.
So we want this to be a bit more of a conversation, but I'm going to let you guys think of a question you have for Suraj. But first I'm going to throw it to Suraj. Like what comes up for you as you're kind of hearing, people in diaspora like us talking about these sorts of interventions and interactions we've had on caste issues?
Thank you, Megan, Sharanjit and Upkar for sharing your personal journey as well as personal experiences, and also thank you for inviting us to be part of your narrative. And you're not alone. We are with you. I think caste does that isolates us and makes us feel miserable in our mind. So please don't feel, and thank you for sharing. Mo, to answer your question, it feels hopeful. It feels incredible because I think these are the conversations that should have happened long time ago, but better late than never. And also I see there is a very clear articulation, like for example Megan, Sharanjit, Upkar, and also you, and we'll see that there is no in a way so there is a grade of insecurity and fears. Similar experiences, for example, might not, and I emphasize might not, come out from other Dalits, for example, who are, let's say, living in a small village in India. They may not be able to have this democratic dialogue because, we are talking to each other as equals. I'm not talking to you as some landowning Dhaliwal where I need to make sure that I don't, mess up with you because I know my livelihood is relying on your, And I think that kind of confidence is only very beautiful and very sharp because it's also unsparing. It is not trying to cope up. It is not trying to, convince you. It is also trying to tell you to, push you to think. And I think this is what Dalits have been doing. They have been teaching the world how to think in their own life, in their own resistance, in their own articulation of their own freedoms. And I think this very essential aspect of Dalits have not been recognized by the people, because the huge talent of these people to be spiritually rooted yet tied to a tradition and their ancestors who have been disregarded as despicable as well as unseeable and untouchable people, yet yearn for something greater than that is given to them in the temporality of life. And I think this is the beauty of being a Dalit. It is not who has submitted or submerged him or herself to the orders that will reiterate or reproduce certain form of oppression, but it is also to stand truth to your own histories. And they practice love, they practice compassion, and they continue to give chance to the oppressor. They keep on giving occasions for us to have dialogue. And the best proof is what has happened in, as we are talking on the topic in Sikhism. It's always a dialogue. But also, at some point, there's going to be a difference, and there's going to be a division, and there's going to be a divergence. And it's fine, it's normal. We left Hinduism, became Sikh. We left Sikhism because it didn't offer us anything. We formed something else. If that doesn't satisfy us, something else will happen. But the question yet remains, where do we harmonize our own staggered soul, our own internal feelings? Is there an avenue? Is there a space where I can go and express my feelings? Is there a mechanism? Is there a therapy? Is there an institution that will be able to accommodate my experiences as something that has language? And what we did essentially, and this is the colonization of every other Brahminical elements in every religion, is to not invent language, metaphors and maxims that will validate Dalit experiences. And because of absence of this, Dalits never bothered, Dalits never mattered to you. Dalits were never a moment of concern, reflection, recitation. It was a passing. Ye to hota hai. The Dalit experience is neutralized. It's not considered an extraordinary. Dalits are extraordinary being. In their very self of being a human being is an extraordinary act. Because the society has not given you the status of being equal. Now challenging the whole societal codes, religious codes, as well as the other material forces that influence you, and yet look into the eye of the oppressor and claim your equality. And what are the Dalits fighting for? They're not asking you to, snatch your wealth and give to me. They're not asking, to retaliate and rape other oppressors. They're just asking the world, recognize us with dignity. Give us the love that you have. And we will give you right back to you 100 times more. Because that's what we have. We just need to tinkle the emotional experiences of Dalit. Try to hear them out. Try to hear out the whispers, their emotions, their love that they are trying to spread. We will find a lot that can be spiritually strengthening our own self. We might not necessarily need those religious institutions that will accord us that. A time spent with a Dalit on a level of learning from each other is, I think, a higher spiritual experience for both. Not only for the person who is, but also for Dalits. Because it is, right now, it has become a transactional thing. Where I need to put out my Dalit card, you need to put out your Jat card or some other card. And because of this commercialization of our identities, funneled through religion, has done more harm. And the more it continues to happen, the more problems we will continue to face.